At 72, I sat across from my only son as he looked me straight in the eye and said, "The country house isn't yours anymore. It belongs to my wife's family now. You don't need it." I smiled, took a sip of my coffee, but inside, a lifetime was being torn apart. They think I'll quietly accept this? They're wrong. My name is Margaret Whitmore, and I've lived in this small Maine town for most of my 72 years. The coastal fog that rolls in each morning has become as familiar to me as the lines on my face, each one telling a story of joy, loss, and survival. I'm what they call a widow now, though that word still feels foreign on my tongue even after 5 years without Edward. Our house in town is modest, a 2-story colonial with white clapboard siding and black shutters that Edward repainted every 3 years without fail. But it's not this house that holds my heart. It's the country house, nestled 40 minutes inland among the pines and maples, where the real memories live. Edward bought that property in 1978, back when land was cheap and dreams were cheaper. We were young then, full of plans and possibilities. He'd grown up on a farm in Iowa and missed the space, the silence, the way morning light filtered through trees instead of buildings. So we saved every penny, skipped vacations, drove our cars until they wheezed their last breath. All for that piece of heaven. The house itself wasn't much when we got it. More of a cabin, really, with a stone foundation that leaked and windows that rattled in the wind. But Edward saw potential where others saw problems. Every weekend for 15 years, we'd pack our tools and our son Michael into the station wagon and make the drive out there. Edward would work on the house while I tended to the vegetable garden, and Michael would run wild through the woods, coming back covered in mud and pine needles, grinning like he'd discovered gold. Those were the golden years, though we didn't know it then. You never do you? You're too busy living to realize you're creating the memories that will sustain you through the darker times ahead. Michael was our only child, not by choice, but by circumstance. After 3 miscarriages, the doctors told me to stop trying. Edward held me that night as I sobbed into his flannel shirt, and then he said, "We've got Michael. We've got each other. We've got the country house. That's more than most people ever get." He was right, of course. Edward usually was. The country house grew with us. Edward added a wraparound porch the summer Michael turned 10. He built a stone fireplace the year Michael started high school. When Michael went off to college at University of Vermont, Edward converted the old shed into a proper workshop where he could tinker with his woodworking projects. Every improvement, every addition, every carefully chosen detail was an act of love for the house, for the land, for our family. Now I live alone in the townhouse, surrounded by photographs and ghosts. The country house sits empty most of the time, waiting. I drive out there twice a week to check on things, to run water through the pipes, to sit on the porch Edward built and remember. The apple trees he planted are mature now, heavy with fruit each fall. The workshop still smells like sawdust and linseed oil. Michael visits occasionally, though less since he married Melissa 3 years ago. She's a real estate agent from Boston, all sharp edges and calculated smiles. She looks at everything like it's for sale, including my son's affection. I've tried to like her. Truly I have. But there's something cold in her eyes when she looks at me, like she's calculating my worth and finding me wanting. They have no children yet, though Melissa talks about it constantly, always in terms of timing and market conditions. Never with the yearning I remember feeling in my bones. Everything with her is a transaction, a deal to be negotiated. Even love, it seems. I should have seen this coming. The signs were there, the way she appraised the country house during their first visit, walking through rooms like a prospector searching for gold, the questions about property values, about inheritance, about estate planning. The way she whispered to Michael when she thought I couldn't hear, planting seeds that would grow into today's betrayal. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story, like all stories of betrayal, begins with trust. I trusted my son. I trusted that the values Edward and I instilled in him, loyalty, family, honor, would hold firm against whatever winds might blow. I trusted that the boy who once helped his father repair the porch steps, who carved his initials in the old oak tree, who cried when we buried our dog beneath the apple trees, would never forget what that place means to us. I was wrong. The call came on a Tuesday morning at 9:15. Michael's voice was unusually formal, like he was reading from a script. "Mom, we need to talk. Can you meet me at Murphy's Diner for lunch? Just the two of us." Murphy's had been our spot since he was little, where we'd go for milkshakes after his baseball games, where Edward taught him to calculate tips in his head, where we celebrated his acceptance to college. The familiarity of the request should have comforted me, but something in his tone set my teeth on edge. I arrived early, claiming our usual booth by the window. The red vinyl seats were more worn now, patched in places with duct tape, but the coffee was still strong and bitter, just how Edward liked it. I ordered a cup and waited, watching the October rain streak down the glass. Michael walked in at 12:30 sharp, shaking water from his umbrella. He'd inherited Edward's punctuality along with his strong jaw and broad shoulders, but where Edward's eyes were warm brown, full of laughter, Michael's were calculating now, avoiding mine as he slid into the booth. "Thanks for coming, Mom." He fidgeted with the menu, though we both knew he'd order the club sandwich like always. "How have you been?" "Fine," I said, studying my son. His suit was new, expensive, Melissa's influence, no doubt. "Though I suspect you didn't call me here to discuss my health." He had the grace to look uncomfortable. The waitress came by, Debbie, who'd been working here since Michael was in diapers, and we ordered club sandwich for him, soup of the day for me. My appetite had fled the moment I saw his face. "Mom," he began after Debbie left, "Melissa and I have been talking." Of course they had. In my mind, I could see them in their sterile Boston apartment, Melissa with her spreadsheets and property assessments, working on my son like water on stone, wearing him down drop by drop. "Her parents are struggling," he continued. "Her dad's medical bills from the heart surgery, and they're about to lose their house. They need somewhere to stay, somewhere to get back on their feet." I sipped my coffee, saying nothing. Let him get to it in his own time. Let him show his cards. "The country house is sitting empty most of the time," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "It's a waste, really. All that space, all that land, and you barely use it. Melissa's parents could live there. Take care of it. They're good people. Mom, they deserve a chance. And what about what I deserve?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "What about what your father built?" Michael's jaw tightened. Another inheritance from Edward. "Dad's gone. Mom, he's been gone for 5 years. That house is it's just sitting there, like some kind of shrine. It's not healthy." "It's not a shrine," I said quietly. "It's our home." "No," he said, leaning forward. "It's a second home, a luxury. And while you're holding on to the past, Melissa's parents are facing homelessness. How is that fair? How is that what Dad would want?" The food arrived, but neither of us touched it. My soup cooled as I stared at this stranger wearing my son's face. "So what are you asking me, Michael? To let them stay there for a while?" He shifted in his seat. "Actually, we were thinking something more permanent. Transfer the deed to them. They could fix it up, make improvements. The house needs work anyway. The roof, the plumbing. You know you can't keep up with the maintenance." "Transfer the deed," I repeated, tasting the words like poison. "Give away your father's house. Our house. You'd still have this house," he said quickly. "You don't need 2 houses. Mom, nobody needs 2 houses. And think about it. Melissa's family would be nearby. When we have kids, they'd have grandparents close by. It would bring the family together. By tearing mine apart." His face flushed. "That's not fair. I'm trying to help everyone here. Melissa's parents are desperate. They've already started packing. I told them—" He stopped abruptly. "You told them what?" My voice was deadly quiet now. "What exactly did you tell them? Michael?" He straightened his shoulders, and in that moment, I saw Melissa's influence clear as day, the rehearsed words, The calculated emotional appeals, the assumption that I would simply roll over and give them what they wanted. I told them the house would be theirs, that you'd understand, that family helps family. He reached across the table, but I pulled my hands back. Mom, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be. The country house isn't yours anymore. It belongs to Melissa's family now. You don't need it. I stood up slowly, pulling on my coat with steady hands, though my heart was shattering. You're right about one thing. Michael, family should help family. It's a shame you've forgotten which family you belong to. I left him there with his untouched sandwich and his rehearsed arguments, walking out into the rain that mixed with the tears I wouldn't let him see, behind me. I heard him call out, but I didn't turn back. The betrayal was complete. Now it was time to decide what to do about it. I drove straight to the country house, my hands gripping the steering wheel as rain hammered the windshield. The 40-minute drive felt both endless and too short. I needed to see it again, to remind myself what Michael was so willing to throw away. The gravel driveway crunched under my tires. The sound Edward always said was like the house welcoming us home. I sat in the car for a moment, looking at our creation through the rain-blurred glass. Even in the gray October light, it was beautiful. The wraparound porch Edward had built, the stone chimney we'd repaired together, the kitchen window where I'd watched countless sunrises while making breakfast for my family. Inside, everything waited patiently. Edward's coffee mug still sat on the kitchen counter where I'd left it after my last visit. Not out of sentiment, I simply hadn't had the heart to wash away that last trace of normalcy. The house smelled like cedar and memories. I walked through each room slowly, touching surfaces like a blind woman relearning the shape of the world. Here was the dining room where we'd hosted 23 Thanksgivings. There was the scorched mark on the wooden floor where Michael had knocked over a candle during his 13th birthday party. Edward had talked about sanding it out, but I'd stopped him. Let it stay. I'd said, it's part of our story. In the living room, I sank into Edward's leather chair by the fireplace. Above the mantel hung our wedding photo, two young people who had no idea what lay ahead. Edward in his borrowed suit, me in my mother's altered dress, both of us grinning like we'd won the lottery. In a way, we had. The memories came flooding back, each one a dagger to the heart. Edward teaching 5-year-old Michael to stack kindling in the fireplace. Like this, buddy. The fire needs to breathe, just like us. Michael's first girlfriend, Sarah, sitting nervously on the couch while Edward pretended to clean his hunting rifle in the corner. I'd scolded him later, but we'd both laughed until our sides hurt. The weekend we'd spent trapped here during the blizzard of '98. Playing board games and telling stories while the world disappeared in white outside our windows. Edward's last summer, when he was too weak from chemo to work on his projects but insisted on sitting on the porch anyway, directing Michael and me as we built the new garden beds. A little to the left, Maggie. Perfect. You've got good hands for this. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, each step creaking in the familiar pattern. Third from the bottom, always loudest. Second from the top, silent as a whisper. Our bed was made with the quilt my grandmother had sewn, another inheritance Michael apparently thought meant nothing. In the closet, Edward's work shirt still hung next to mine. I pressed my face into the flannel, but his scent had long since faded. Only the memory remained, stubborn as the man himself. The workshop was the hardest. Edward's tools hung on their pegboard, each outline traced in pencil so everything had its place. His final project, a jewelry box for my birthday that he never got to finish, sat on the workbench, gathering dust. Michael used to say he'd complete it someday, honor his father's memory, another broken promise. I found myself in Michael's old room, unchanged since high school, posters of bands he'd outgrown, trophies from Little League, the desk where he'd struggled through homework while Edward patiently explained algebra. On the bookshelf, a photo from his high school graduation, Edward already sick, but hiding it. Michael still innocent of what was coming. Me caught between pride and the terrible knowledge that our time was running out. How had that boy become the man in the diner? When had my son decided that his wife's family mattered more than his own history? I knew Melissa was behind this, but Michael was a grown man. He'd made his choice. He'd sat across from me and told me the house wasn't mine anymore, as if he had the right, as if 30 years of marriage and memory could be erased by his wife's ambitions. Back downstairs, I stood in the kitchen where I'd cooked 10,000 meals, where Edward had danced with me to the radio while dinner simmered, where Michael had done homework at the scarred wooden table. Every corner held a piece of us. The rain had stopped, and weak sunlight filtered through the clouds. I stepped onto the porch, breathing in the smell of wet earth and pine. The apple trees Edward had planted stood in neat rows, heavy with fruit we'd never harvest together again. In the distance, the mountains rose like promises, constant and unchanging. This wasn't just property. It wasn't an asset to be transferred, a problem to be solved. This was the physical manifestation of our love, built board by board, stone by stone. Edward's hands were in every improvement, my dreams in every garden bed, Michael's childhood in every tree he'd climbed, and now my son wanted to hand it over to strangers. People who'd never stripped wallpaper at midnight, laughing at the hideous patterns underneath, who'd never hauled water from the well when the pump failed, or spent Christmas morning here in pajamas, wrapping paper scattered like snow across the floor. I locked the door behind me, but I knew locks wouldn't keep them out if Michael had truly promised them our home. I needed something stronger than locks. I needed the truth, and I needed the law. As I drove back to town, I wasn't crying anymore. The tears had crystallized into something harder, sharper. Edward always said I was strongest when protecting what I loved. He was about to be proven right. The next morning, I called Tom Callahan's office at 8 sharp. Tom had been Edward's lawyer and friend for 30 years, handling everything from the purchase of the country house to Edward's final arrangements. His secretary, Ruth, recognized my voice immediately. "Margaret, honey, how are you?" Tom just got in. "Let me put you through." Tom's voice was warm but concerned. "Maggie, what's wrong? You sound upset." "I need to see you." "Tom, today if possible. It's about the country house. Come by at 10. We'll sort out whatever it is." I dressed carefully. Edward's favorite blue dress, the pearl necklace he'd given me for our 25th anniversary. Armor comes in many forms. Tom's office hadn't changed since Edward's visits. Same leather chairs, same diplomas on the walls, same photo of Tom and Edward holding their prize trout from a fishing trip in '85. Tom himself had more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes, but his handshake was still firm. "Sit down, Maggie. Tell me what's happening." I explained Michael's ambush at the diner, his assumption that he could simply give away our house. Tom's expression grew darker with each word. "Let me pull Edward's file," he said, turning to an ancient filing cabinet. "I remember when we set everything up. Edward was very specific about his wishes." The file was thick, full of documents I'd signed but never truly read. I'd trusted Edward to handle such things, just as he'd trusted me to handle others. Tom spread papers across his desk, his fingers finding what he sought with practiced ease. "Here," he said, sliding a document toward me. "The Whitmore Family Trust, established in 2005. Edward was concerned about protecting your assets, especially after his diagnosis. He wanted to make sure you'd never be pressured or manipulated." I read through the legal language, Tom translating when necessary. The country house wasn't simply in my name. It was held in an irrevocable trust. I was the sole trustee during my lifetime, with specific provisions for succession. "Look at this clause." Tom pointed to a highlighted section. "The property cannot be sold, transferred, or gifted without the written consent of all beneficiaries." That's you, as primary beneficiary, and Michael as contingent beneficiary. But here's the key part. There's a protection clause. If any beneficiary attempts to force a transfer or acts against the interests of the trust, they can be removed entirely. "Edward never told me about this," I said, though I wasn't surprised. My husband had always been one to plan quietly, to protect without fanfare. "There's more," Tom continued, pulling out another document. "The maintenance fund. Edward set aside money specifically for property upkeep, taxes, and improvements. It's been generating interest for 5 years. You have more than enough to maintain the property for decades. So Michael can't do anything, Tom said firmly. The house is protected. Edward made sure of that. He also left this. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name in Edward's careful script. Inside was a letter dated just weeks before his death. My dearest Maggie, if you're reading this with Tom, then something has happened that's made you doubt your right to our home. Don't doubt. Don't let anyone, not even our son, take what we built together. The country house is more than wood and stone. It's every dream we shared, every sacrifice we made, every moment of joy we experienced. It belongs to you as surely as my love does, completely and forever. I've asked Tom to explain the legal protections, but know this, I put them in place not because I didn't trust you to be strong, but because I wanted your strength to have the full force of law behind it. Stand firm, my love. You've earned the right. Forever yours, Edward. I read it 3 times before the tears came, even from beyond the grave. Edward was still protecting me, still being my partner. What do I do now? I asked Tom. First, we send Michael a formal notice about the trust. Make it clear that any attempt to transfer the property would be illegal. Second, we change the locks and install security. Third, he paused, choosing his words carefully. You might want to consider whether Michael should remain a beneficiary of the trust, given his actions. Remove my own son? I'm not suggesting anything, Tom said gently. I'm simply explaining your options. Edward gave you complete discretion as trustee. You can modify beneficiaries if someone acts against the trust's interests. I thought about Michael's face at the diner, the way he dismissed my feelings, our history, the way he'd already promised our home to strangers. Not yet. I decided, let's see if legal reality changes his attitude. But Tom, I want to be prepared for anything. What else should I do? We spent the next hour strategizing. Tom recommended a security company, gave me contact information for a property management firm that could document the house's condition, and suggested I gather any evidence of Michael's attempts to give away the property. One more thing, Tom said as I prepared to leave. Edward also left instructions about the apple orchard. He wanted those trees to produce fruit for the local food bank every fall, in perpetuity. There's a fund for that, too. He said you'd understand why. I did understand. The year Michael was born, we'd struggled financially. The food bank had helped us through 3 hard months. Edward never forgot a kindness or a debt. I left Tom's office feeling something I hadn't felt since that horrible lunch with Michael, powerful. Not vindictive, not angry, but solidly, unshakably powerful. Edward had given me more than a house. He'd given me an impregnable fortress. The country house wasn't Michael's to give. It had never been Michael's to give. And now, armed with law and love, I was ready to make that absolutely clear. The locksmith arrived at the country house at 7 the next morning. I watched him work, replacing every lock with heavy-duty commercial-grade hardware. The security company came next, installing cameras and motion sensors around the property. By noon, the house was more secure than it had ever been. I had Tom's paralegal post-official notices at the property boundaries. Private property protected by Whitmore Family Trust, no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted. The language was deliberately formal, deliberately intimidating. Then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, on Saturday morning, I was sitting on the porch with my coffee when I heard vehicles approaching. Multiple vehicles, from the sound of it. I set down my cup and checked my phone, making sure the security company's number was ready. A convoy rounded the bend, Michael's BMW followed by a large U-Haul truck and an older sedan I didn't recognize. My son got out first, his face tight with determination. Melissa emerged from the passenger side, wearing what she probably thought was appropriate country attire, designer jeans and pristine boots that had never seen mud. From the sedan came an older couple I assumed were Melissa's parents. The man was tall and thin, with the soft look of someone who'd spent his life behind a desk. The woman clutched a small dog, her eyes already calculating square footage. "Mom?" Michael called out, spotting me on the porch. "What are you doing here?" "Having coffee at my own house," I replied calmly. "The question is what you're doing here with a moving truck." Melissa stepped forward, her real estate smile firmly in place. "Margaret, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Michael told his parents they could move in today. They've already given notice on their apartment." Then Michael made a promise he had no authority to make. "Mom, stop this," Michael said, moving toward the porch steps. "We discussed this. You agreed. I agreed to nothing." I stood up, blocking his path. "And you'll find the locks have been changed." His face flushed. "You can't do this. I'm your son. This is family property, which is held in an irrevocable trust that you have no control over." I pulled out my phone. "You have 2 minutes to leave before I call the police." "The police?" Melissa's voice rose. "This is ridiculous, Bob. Cynthia, I'm so sorry about this confusion." She turned to her parents, who were looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Mom Whitmore is obviously having some sort of episode. The only episode here is attempted theft," I said clearly. "The security cameras are recording everything, by the way, including that moving truck full of belongings you intended to put in my house." Michael tried his key in the lock, his movements becoming frantic when it wouldn't turn. "Mom, please, don't do this. Melissa's parents have nowhere else to go." "That's unfortunate," I said, "but it's not my problem, just as my house wasn't yours to give away." "For God's sake," Melissa snapped, her real estate veneer cracking. "You're being selfish. You have 2 houses. Who needs 2 houses?" "I do," I said simply, "and more importantly, it's mine to be selfish with." The older man, Bob, finally spoke. "Perhaps we should go. Melissa, this is clearly a family matter that needs to be resolved." "No," Melissa said sharply. "We're not going anywhere. She can't just—" The sound of sirens cut her off. I hadn't called yet, but apparently the security company's motion sensors had triggered an automatic response. 2 police cars pulled up behind the U-Haul. Officer Danny Morrison, whom I'd known since he was in Michael's grade school class, stepped out first. "Mrs. Whitmore, we got an alert about possible trespassing. Thank you for responding, Danny," I said. "These people were just leaving." "Mom," Michael's voice cracked, "you called the cops on your own son? I didn't call anyone. The security system did that, and right now, you're trespassing on private property after being asked to leave." Danny looked uncomfortable but professional. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm going to need you and your group to vacate the premises." "This is insane," Melissa sputtered. "We're family." "Ma'am," Danny's partner, an older officer I didn't know, stepped forward. "Family disputes are still subject to property laws. If Mrs. Whitmore wants you to leave, you need to leave." I watched as the horrible realization dawned on Michael's face. He truly believed I would cave, that faced with the moving truck and his in-laws, I'd surrender out of politeness or guilt. He'd learned too much from his wife and forgotten everything about his mother. "You heard the officers," I said quietly. "Leave now, and we'll pretend this never happened. Stay, and I'll press charges." Melissa's parents were already hurrying back to their car, the woman clutching her dog tighter, both of them shooting accusatory looks at their daughter. The U-Haul driver, who'd been watching the drama unfold, started his engine. "This isn't over," Melissa hissed as Michael guided her back to their car. "We'll contest the trust. We'll prove you're mentally incompetent. You'll do nothing." I cut her off. "Because you have no grounds, no rights, and no claim. But please, waste your money on lawyers. I'm sure they'll be happy to explain reality to you." Michael looked back at me one last time, and for a moment, I saw my little boy in his eyes, confused, hurt, angry at not getting his way, but he wasn't a little boy anymore. He was a man who'd chosen his side, and it wasn't mine. They left in a parade of shame, the police following to ensure they actually departed. I sat back down on my porch, my coffee cold now, and watched the dust settle on the driveway. The house stood strong around me, protected by more than new locks and cameras. It was armored in law and love, exactly as Edward had intended. Inside, his coffee mug still waited on the counter. I'd wash it eventually, but not today. Today, I'd won. Word travels fast in a small Maine town. By Monday, everyone knew about the incident at the country house. I could feel the whispers following me through the grocery store, see the quick exchanges of glances at the post office. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with a kind of shocked admiration. Debbie from Murphy's Diner pulled me aside when I stopped for coffee. "Heard Michael tried to give away the country house," she said, not bothering with pretense. "Also heard you had to call the cops on him." "The security company called them," I corrected gently. "Good for you either way." She squeezed my shoulder. "Edward would be proud." That became the town's verdict. At the bank, the hardware store, the library, everywhere I went. People who'd known us for decades made their position clear. Michael had crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed. The real damage to Michael and Melissa's reputation came from an unexpected source: Bob and Cynthia. Melissa's parents were apparently mortified by the entire situation. According to what I heard through the grapevine, they'd had no idea the house wasn't Michael's to give. They'd been told I was elderly and confused, that I'd agreed to the arrangement but was becoming forgetful. They checked into the Harbor Inn and spent 3 days in town, apologizing to anyone who'd listen. Bob cornered me outside the pharmacy on Tuesday afternoon. "Mrs. Whitmore, I need you to know we had no idea," he said. His face flushed with embarrassment. "Melissa told us you were downsizing, that you wanted us to take care of the property. If we'd known the truth—" "It's not your fault," I told him, meaning it. "You were lied to, just as I was." "That house," he continued, "Melissa showed us pictures. Talked about the renovations she planned, the walls she'd knock down, the modern updates she'd make. I should have known something was wrong when she talked about it like it was already hers. Knock down walls, modern updates. The thought of Melissa's renovation plans made my stomach turn. She would have gutted our history, stripped away every trace of Edward's handiwork. By Wednesday, Michael's business was suffering. He worked as a financial advisor at a firm in Portland, building his client base on trust and reputation. Small-town connections had helped him establish himself. Now those same connections were working against him. 3 of his clients called to cancel appointments. According to my friend Janet, who worked in the same building, they don't want financial advice from someone who'd steal from his own mother, she told me over lunch. That's what they're saying, that he tried to steal your house. On Thursday evening, Tom Callahan called. Michael's lawyer reached out. "Mauiti," he said, "they want to discuss the situation." "There's nothing to discuss." That's what I told them. "But Maggie, you should know. Melissa is pushing hard. She's convinced Michael to at least explore their options." "Let them explore," I said. "The trust is ironclad, isn't it?" "It is. But they could make things unpleasant, claim undue influence, mental incapacity. They'd lose, but it would be ugly." "Then let it be ugly," I said, surprising myself with my calmness. "I've already lost my son. Tom, what else can they take?" Friday brought an unexpected visitor. Sarah McNeil, Michael's high school girlfriend, now a teacher at the elementary school. She stood on my doorstep with a casserole dish and a sympathetic smile. "Mrs. Whitmore, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry." I invited her in, grateful for the kindness. Sarah had always been a sweet girl, the one who got away when Michael chose Boston University over staying local. "I probably shouldn't say this," she said over tea, "but Michael called me yesterday. First time in 10 years. Wanted to know if I'd noticed any signs of confusion or memory issues when I've seen you around town." "What did you tell him?" "The truth, that you're sharp as ever and he should be ashamed of himself." She paused. "He didn't take it well." The desperation in Michael's actions was telling. He was scrambling, trying to build a case that didn't exist. Meanwhile, Melissa's parents had returned to Boston, but not before Bob left a check at Tom's office. Payment for emotional distress and inconvenience. I had Tom return it. They were victims too, in their way. By Saturday, a week after the confrontation, the town had rendered its judgment. Michael and Melissa were persona non grata. Their favorite restaurant suddenly had no reservations available. The country club where Melissa networked for her real estate business had a mysteriously full calendar. Even the gas station attendant, who'd known Michael since childhood, barely acknowledged him. Small towns have their own kind of justice, swift and thorough. I heard from mutual acquaintances that Melissa was furious, raging about small-minded locals and their backwards loyalties. She didn't understand that in places like ours. Some things are sacred. Family homes, parents, the trust between generations. Michael tried calling several times. I didn't answer. He left voicemails that progressed from angry to pleading to frustrated. "Mom, you're being unreasonable. Mom, we need to talk about this like adults. Mom, you're destroying our family over a house." But he was wrong. I wasn't destroying anything. He'd done that himself the moment he looked me in the eye and told me my home wasn't mine anymore. The security cameras at the country house captured him driving by twice, slowing down but never stopping, both times in the evening, both times alone. Was he remembering, regretting, or just calculating his next move? Through it all, I maintained my routine. Coffee on the country house porch every morning, tending the garden, collecting apples from Edward's trees to donate to the food bank, living my life in the home my husband built. Surrounded by the community that understood its value, the town's judgment was complete. Michael had revealed himself as someone who would betray his own mother for his wife's ambitions. In a place where people remembered kindnesses for generations and grudges for longer, that was a stain that wouldn't wash out easily. The gossip mill that had once celebrated Michael's successes, his college degree, his engagement, his professional achievements, now spoke of him in hushed, disapproving tones. He'd become a cautionary tale, whispered over coffee at Murphy's diner, the boy who forgot where he came from, who tried to steal his mother's home. The knock came at 8:45 on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after the incident. I knew it was Michael before I opened the door. Something about the rhythm, hesitant but insistent, was purely him. He stood on my doorstep looking haggard, his usual polish worn away. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. For a moment, I saw Edward in him, not in his features, but in his defeat. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I stepped aside without a word. He followed me to the kitchen, sitting at the same table where he'd done homework 30 years ago. I didn't offer coffee. "Melissa left," he said finally. "Moved back to her parents' place in Boston. She's talking about divorce." I said nothing. What was there to say? Congratulations? I'm sorry? Neither felt right. "My business is failing," he continued. "Lost 6 clients this month. Word gets around, doesn't it?" His laugh was bitter. The prodigal son who tried to steal from his mother, not exactly a ringing endorsement for a financial advisor. "You did this to yourself, Michael." His head snapped up. "Did I? Or did you destroy my life over a house?" "I protected what was mine," I said evenly. "You tried to take it. The consequences are yours to bear. It's just property." His fist hit the table, making the salt shaker jump. "Just wood and stone and land. How is that worth more than your son?" "You're the one who made it a choice between property and family," I said, my voice sharper now. "You're the one who sat across from me at Murphy's and told me my home wasn't mine anymore. You're the one who showed up with a moving truck and tried to force my hand. I was trying to help Melissa's family." "No," I cut him off. "You were trying to impress your wife. You were trying to be the big man who could deliver what she wanted, and you were willing to hurt me to do it." He deflated, sinking back in his chair. "Mom, I didn't think of it as hurting you. I thought you'd understand. The house just sits empty." "Your father built that house," I said, each word precise. "We spent every weekend for 15 years working on it. You helped. You hammered nails, painted walls, planted trees. How could you forget that?" "I didn't forget," he said quietly. Melissa made it sound so logical. "You have 2 houses. They had none. Simple math." "Life isn't math. Michael, love isn't an equation you can balance." We sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, October wind rattled the windows, the same sound that had punctuated 1,000 conversations in this kitchen. "Do you remember?" I said finally. "The summer you were 12. You helped Dad build the deck, and you hit your thumb with the hammer. You cried so hard, wanted to quit, but Dad sat with you on the half-finished boards and told you something. Do you remember what he said?" Michael's eyes were wet. He said pain was just pride leaving the body, that building something worth keeping always hurt a little. And then we finished the deck together. His voice broke. "God, Mom, how did I get here? How did I become someone who would try to steal from his mother?" I finished. "I've been asking myself the same question. I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I don't even know how to fix this." "You can't," I said simply. "Sorry doesn't rebuild trust. Sorry doesn't erase the image of you showing up with a moving truck. Sorry doesn't undo telling the whole town I was becoming senile when they wouldn't support you." He flinched. "You heard about that. I hear everything, Michael. This is a small town. These people have known you since birth. They watched your father and I struggle and sacrifice. They know what that house means, and now they know what kind of man you've become. So that's it?" He looked desperate now. "One mistake and I'm banished? Cut off forever? You keep calling it a mistake," I observed. "Like you accidentally tried to take my house, but it wasn't a mistake, was it? It was a plan, a calculated decision. You and Melissa discussed it, strategized, even told her parents it was a done deal. That's not a mistake, Michael. That's a betrayal. What do you want from me?" His voice rose again. "I've lost my wife, my reputation, my business is crumbling. Isn't that enough punishment? I don't want anything from you," I said and realized it was true. "And this isn't about punishment. This is about consequences. You made choices. These are the results. So you won't forgive me?" I thought about Edward, about what he would want, but Edward had never faced this particular pain. His son choosing greed over family, manipulation over love. "Forgiveness isn't mine to give right now," I said finally. "Maybe someday, but trust, respect. Those you'll have to earn back, if you even can." "How?" "That's for you to figure out. But I'll tell you this. It doesn't start with what you need or want. It doesn't start with your marriage or your business or your reputation. It starts with understanding why what you did was wrong. Really understanding, not just mouthing words because you're facing consequences." Michael stood up slowly, looking older than his 38 years. "I should go." I didn't stop him. At the door, he turned back. "The country house?" he said. "It really is beautiful. I'd forgotten how much of Dad is in that place. How much of us—" "Yes," I agreed. "You did forget. That's the saddest part of all this. Michael, you forgot." He left then, walking out into the October night. I watched from the window as his car disappeared down the street, taking with it the last vestiges of the boy I'd raised. I didn't know if he'd find his way back to being someone worthy of trust. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to look at him without seeing that terrible lunch at Murphy's, that moving truck in my driveway, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The country house was safe. Edward's legacy was protected, and I had survived the unthinkable, a betrayal by my own blood. That had to be enough for now. 6 months later, I sat on the porch of the country house, watching spring paint the mountains in shades of green. The apple trees Edward planted were in full bloom, their white flowers like promises against the blue sky. In my hand was a cup of coffee, strong and bitter, just how he liked it. The house had never been more alive. I'd used the maintenance fund to restore the workshop, finishing Edward's last project, the jewelry box he'd been making for my birthday. It wasn't perfect, but it was complete. Sometimes that's all we can ask for. The food bank had sent a lovely thank you letter about the apple harvest. 300 pounds of fruit, feeding families throughout the county. Edward would have been proud. I'd planted 3 more trees in his honor, young saplings that would bear fruit long after I was gone. Michael had tried to contact me several times through the winter. Christmas cards, voicemails, even a letter that I recognized Melissa's influence in. Too polished, too calculated. I hadn't responded. Some wounds need time to scar over before you can even think about healing. But then, last month, something different arrived. A package with no return address, Though I knew Michael's handwriting, inside was a wooden picture frame, handmade, amateur but earnest. The joints weren't perfect. The finish was uneven, but I could see the effort in every imperfect corner. He'd been practicing woodworking, following Edward's old patterns. The frame held a photo I'd never seen before. Edward and young Michael working on the country house deck, both covered in sawdust and smiling. On the back, in Michael's writing, I remember now. I'd hung it in the kitchen next to the window where I could see it while washing dishes. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. A first step on a very long road. Tom Callahan had updated me on Michael's situation. The divorce was final. He'd moved back to Maine, to a small apartment in town. He was rebuilding his business slowly. Honestly, this time. He'd been volunteering with Habitat for Humanity, learning construction the way Edward had taught him years ago. Learning the value of building something with your own hands. He asks about you. Tom had said, never directly, but he asks. Let him ask, I'd replied. Maybe asking is part of remembering. Today, I'd made a decision. I'd called Tom and had him add a codicil to the trust. When I died, Michael would inherit the country house, but with conditions. He couldn't sell it for 20 years. He had to maintain the apple orchard for the food bank. He had to live in it at least 6 months of every year. Most importantly, he had to keep Edward's workshop as it was. Tools on their pegboard, that last project space preserved. A reminder of what patient love could build. I wasn't ready to tell him yet. Trust, once shattered, couldn't be rebuilt with documents and legal clauses. But someday, when I was gone, he'd learn that despite everything. I couldn't cut him out entirely. He was still my son, still the boy who'd helped build this place, even if he'd forgotten for a while. The security system remained, the locks stayed changed. I wasn't a fool. But I'd started walking through town again without feeling the weight of whispers. The story had become part of local lore. The widow who'd stood her ground, who'd protected what mattered. Some called me hard, others called me strong. I didn't care much either way. What mattered was this. I was here, in the house Edward built, surrounded by the life we'd created together. The gardens were thriving, the apple trees were healthy, and the workshop still smelled of sawdust and possibilities. In the distance, I could see a figure walking up the long driveway. Michael, keeping his distance but drawn back like a moth to flame. He'd been doing this for weeks now, walking to the edge of the property, standing at the gate, then leaving without approaching the house. Today, I raised my coffee cup in acknowledgement. He froze, then slowly, hesitantly, raised his hand in return. We stayed like that for a moment, mother and son, separated by distance and betrayal but connected by something deeper than either. Then he turned and walked away. And I went back to my coffee and my memories. Someday, perhaps, he'd walk all the way to the porch. Someday, we might sit together and remember Edward, remember what it meant to build something worth keeping. But not today. Today. I sat alone on my porch, queen of my small kingdom, protector of my husband's legacy. The morning sun warmed my face, the coffee was perfect, and the country house stood strong around me. People think old age means weakness. They forget. A mother defending what she loves can be the fiercest warrior of all, and sometimes the greatest victory isn't in the battle itself, but in the quiet morning after, when you sit on your porch and know that you've won not just a house, but the right to your own story. The apple blossoms drifted on the breeze like snow, and somewhere in the workshop, I could almost hear the echo of Edward's hammer, still building, still protecting, still love made manifest in wood and stone. This was enough. This was everything. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let me know your thoughts on Margaret's journey. What would you have done in her situation?